The rise of veganism seems unstoppable. From advertisements, newspaper headlines, documentaries, and even global politics, veganism and animal rights seems to constantly be forcing its way into public discourse. As a result, more and more people every day are finding themselves becoming part of a growing movement that until recently they would have hardly been exposed to. It's for these new vegans, or soon-to-be vegans, that I wanted to make a video briefly covering the modern animal rights movement, so we can all know exactly what's been happening over the last few decades to bring us to this point. Before I go any further, chances are high that you're not subscribed to this channel, and if you're interested in animal rights and veganism and getting these messages out to more people, that might be a good idea. You'll be made aware of when I upload new videos, and it also helps the channel reach a wider audience, so I'd be greatly appreciative. Now, on with the video. The animal rights movement is a social justice movement that has only really existed since the 20th century. Animal rights as a philosophical concept, though, dates back to thousands of years ago. Evidence of animal rights and veganism dating back to this time includes the following poem by philosopher, poet, and writer, and I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, al-Ma'ari, who was born in Syria in 973 AD and died in the year 1057. The poem, titled I No Longer Steal from Nature, is translated into English as follows. Come to me that you may hear something of sound truth. Do not unjustly eat the fish the water has given up, and do not desire as food the flesh of slaughtered animals, or the white milk of mothers who intended its pure draught for their young, not noble ladies. And do not grieve the unsuspecting birds by taking eggs, for injustice is the worst of crimes. And spare the honey which the bees get industriously from the flowers of fragrant plants, for they did not store it that it might belong to others, nor did they gather it for bounty and gifts. I washed my hands of all this, and I wish that I perceived my way before my hair went grey. As you can see, all the fundamentals of veganism and the ideas of animal rights existed in the minds of men and women tens of centuries before the likes of vegan sausage rolls and plant-based cheese that actually melts. In fact, we can look even further back than a 1,000-year-old poem by turning our attention to the ancient Indian religion Jainism. Jainism predates many modern religions significantly, as it is over 5,000 years old. The main religious premise of the Jains is ahimsa, which is the principle of non-violence towards all living beings. Jainism is still widely practiced today, and all of its followers are either strict vegans or occasionally lacto-vegetarians. So looking throughout human history, we can see a similar sentiment being echoed over and over. From ancient philosophers like Pythagoras, who said, "For as long as men massacre animals, they will kill each other," to utilitarians like Jeremy Bentham. The question is not, can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? All the way through to great physicists like Einstein, who said, if a man aspires towards a righteous life, his first act of abstinence is from injury to animals. But this video is not meant to be a collection of quotes throughout history. We could be here all day doing that. I want to instead talk about the rise of the modern animal rights movement. So let's take a journey back through time to around 75 years ago. It's the mid to late 1940s and we're somewhere in the Western world. The impact World War II had on food production has been addressed and meat is once again readily available to the masses after years of rationing. As meat production begins to increase, new methods of farming and slaughter are being experimented with, which with the passing of a few years results in the price of meat and dairy coming down. As meat on the table had always previously been seen as a sign of prosperity, the public were quite happy to have their demand continue to rise right alongside this increased supply. However, a couple of years earlier, in 1944, British husband and wife Donald and Dorothy Watson founded the registered charity known as the Vegan Society. They did this after they had decided that being vegetarian wasn't enough due to the cruelty and exploitation inherent in industrialized dairy and egg production. They decided to coin a new term to refer to their new lifestyle choice, vegan, using just the first 3 and last 2 letters of vegetarian. The definition of the word, as originally given by Donald Watson, has evolved over the years to become the rather lengthy veganism, a philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of, and cruelty to, animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. The vegan society would go on to promote the vegan philosophy over the coming decades, including making TV appearances to raise awareness and provide information. But although some people were drawn to this new way of living, veganism did not manage to capture mainstream appeal just yet. Fast forwarding to the 1970s and 80s, in order to meet the seemingly endless growing demand for animal products, intensified farming grew significantly, and this only got worse as we got closer and closer to the new millennium. Take chicken farming in the US for example. In the 1970s, the US had around 30,000 chicken farms, but by 1995 that number had dropped to about 20,000. And yet in that same time frame, the amount of chickens being slaughtered in the US tripled. Today, over 9 billion chickens are killed each year in the United States. To give it some perspective, that number is 1,000 times greater than the number of stars known to be visible from the Earth's surface with the naked eye. In 1975, Australian moral philosopher Peter Singer published the book Animal Liberation, which some people have jokingly referred to as the Bible of the animal rights movement, due to its influence in popularising the term speciesism, a term first coined just a few years earlier by British psychologist Richard Ryder. In the 1980s, a new organisation was founded in America, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, otherwise known simply as PETA. The organisation first caught the public's attention in the summer of 1981 during what became known as the Silver Spring Monkeys case, a widely publicised dispute about experiments conducted on 17 macaque monkeys inside the Institute of Behavioural Research in Silver Spring, Maryland. The case lasted 10 years, involved the only police raid on an animal laboratory in the United States, and triggered an amendment in 1985 to the US Animal Welfare Act. PETA have gone on to have countless wins for both animal welfare and animal rights, and are still active as one of the largest animal non-profits in the world, though it has to be said that they attract a lot of controversy, and there is a sizable section of the animal rights movement who feel very dissatisfied with a number of the actions PETA have engaged in. Although many people have issues and concerns with PETA's work, there was a drastic rise in the number of worldwide vegetarians and vegans during the 1980s and 90s, which has been partially credited to PETA's popularity. It was also during these 2 decades that the truly controversial animal rights groups that we tend to think of when someone says militant vegan came into prominence. The Animal Liberation Front, or ALF, is an international decentralized political and social resistance movement that sprang up as a reaction to activists who felt more drastic and direct action was the best way to help animals in need. ALF actions include trespassing to remove animals from laboratories and farms, causing property damage to financially hinder businesses that exploit animals, and arranging safe houses, veterinary care, and operating sanctuaries for rescued animals to live in. Due to all of the illegal activity and the public's general lack of investment in animal rights, critics have labelled the ALF as a terrorist organisation. Despite this, activists say the movement is wholly non-violent, with ALF spokespersons condemning acts of violence and going on record as saying such things as, "Any act that furthers the cause of animal liberation, where all reasonable precautions are taken not to harm human or non-human life, may be claimed as an ALF action," and "One thing I know that separates us from the people we are constantly accused of being, that is, terrorists, is the fact that we have harmed no one." Throughout the 90s and early 2000s, certain countries would begin to see the growing interest in animal rights result in new laws being introduced, such as the banning of fur farming in the UK, fueled mostly by the work of the new generation of activists. Activist groups continued to spring up all across the globe, either utilising new methods or sticking to tried and true approaches. For example, today we're used to seeing large groups like Anonymous for the Voiceless, the Animal Save Movement, Direct Action Everywhere, and the Earthlings Experience, among many others, as well as smaller independent activist groups such as Hunt Sabs and protest groups operating worldwide. One incredibly powerful new tool that the animal rights movement gained in the 21st century, though, is the rise of social media. Prior to this, people would have had to go out of their way to either learn or teach about animal agriculture or veganism. But now anyone can post content to Facebook, Twitter, TikTok and the like, and potentially reach thousands or tens of thousands of people. No longer do people need the right set of circumstances to begin thinking about animal rights. They could be sitting alone in their home on a computer or mobile device and suddenly have all sorts of information on the topic right there in front of them. Another plus to the rise of social media and this sharing of information is the dispelling of myths surrounding topics such as animal agriculture practices and plant-based nutrition. Suddenly, lies about how animals are treated, their ability to suffer, the environment and health impacts of animal industries, and about the practicality of being vegan were all hard to maintain. And no doubt this easy access to information plays a big part in how veganism has accelerated like never before in recent years. To give some examples, the number of vegans in the UK quadrupled between 2014 and 2019, and in America, the number of vegans grew by 600% between 2014 and 2017. Even China has plans to reduce meat consumption by 50% by 2030, although this is for environmental reasons rather than animal rights concerns. So yes, there are many reasons one might be optimistic about the animal rights movement, but what about the actual animals alive right now? It may seem pessimistic to talk like this after just listing so many decades of continued growth for animal rights, but it's important to remember that more animals are suffering right now than ever before. A recent study suggested that Europe and the United States will reach peak meat in the year 2025. And while this might sound good on the surface, this means despite the growing number of vegans, more animals are projected to be killed unnecessarily by the meat industry alone next year than this year, and we are a long way from seeing that number drop. This is a very serious issue, and it's not right to just put our feet up and assume that because things are improving, the animals are guaranteed their liberation. Now more than ever, we need to keep the ball rolling. This is why each and every person watching this video who cares about animal rights needs to be an activist. Being an activist is whatever you want as long as you are helping, so you have no excuse to be put off. No matter your age, no matter where you live, what your background is, what your career is, you can be an activist. I'd recommend people maybe look to volunteer with animal rights groups like those mentioned earlier in the video, or to seek out local independent activist groups and see how you can help. If that sounds intimidating or not possible for you, you can be more creative with your activism and keep things simple. Like writing? Consider writing poems to inspire people to think about the animals. Like food? Why not utilize social media, like spoken about previously, by sharing delicious plant-based food online and dispel those myths about vegan food being bland, repetitive, or gross? Maybe you're more politically inclined and want to write letters to your local MPs or get petitions signed to improve the lives of animals currently victims of your local community. You could give to the right charities or volunteer your time at animal sanctuaries. Even just speaking to your friends and family about animal suffering, and how if they aren't vegan, they're responsible for animal abuse, counts as being an activist. I've included loads of resources and information in the description of this video for you, so go take a look once you're done watching. This has been a brief history of the animal rights movement, as it has got such a long way to go. There will be many milestones along the way to creating a fairer and more just world for non-human animals. Some of those steps along the way could start with an action you take. You will never know if you don't try. And if you've watched this far into the video, you almost certainly care about animals, so whatever you do it for them. Dream big, and eventually, we will win. Thanks for watching to the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, give it a like and maybe share it with someone you know. As I said at the start of the video, please remember to subscribe as well if you aren't already. Currently this is still a variety channel, so content varies from informational to hopefully impactful, to downright bottom of the internet memery, so that's something to be aware of. Very recently we passed 250 subscribers, so I also want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you who has hit that little red button and has been enjoying my uploads and engaging in the comments section. Obviously I try and read all of the comments left on the channel, and I really enjoy doing it, so I definitely want to say a big thank you to all of you who have contributed since I started uploads in December. Let me know what you thought of today's video, and I'll see you next time. Peace.